I'm Kimberly Atkins-Storr. This is On Point.
Growing up in a house where there's all type of like African-American just artifacts that are everywhere. There's King, there's Malcolm, but there's also Ali, there's Robinson. And this culture fuels you to be proud of who you are.
That's Gianni Clarkson. He grew up in Detroit in the 1980s. His dad was a history teacher, but Gianni says his earliest history lessons didn't take place in the classroom.
You know, field trips to Motown Records, down where I went to school in downtown Detroit. And there's a major church that's in downtown Detroit, Second Ebenezer, which is the last stop of the Underground Railroad. So it was everywhere for me.
But the people and events Gianni learned about at home and in his neighborhood didn't always show up when he was at school. Sometimes, he says, history about Black Americans was missing.
I remember one time doing a teacher that was white was teaching about World War I. And I immediately rose my hand and was like, well, are we going to talk about the Harlem Hellfighters? And they went, who? Well, that's not in the text.
The Harlem Hellfighters were a group of Black soldiers in World War I who fought with the French army because many white Americans refused to serve with Black soldiers. Gianni went on to become a history teacher himself. He taught middle and high school in Washington, D.C. for more than a decade. He's now an educational consultant. And those gaps he noticed as a kid in the way Black history was taught, he says they're still there today.
The lack of attention paid to Reconstruction. Ooh. But if you look at most social studies standards, Reconstruction is like, and we all lived happily ever after, the end. And that's not true. When I first started teaching and I'm looking at what happens after Reconstruction, I'm going, well, that's peculiar. We're going right into the Great Depression. We missed something, didn't we?
Gianni says we shouldn't avoid teaching tough topics and that even young kids are capable of understanding.
Introduce this topic simply here. If you work for someone, should you be paid? Well, what if I told you that for a long time, there was a culture of people that inside of our country were not paid to work. And if they did not work, the worst of things would happen to them. Would you consider that fair or would you consider that unfair? So let's dive into the history of the transatlantic slave trade, why it happened, who benefited from it. Are there still evidence of these things that are in 2023? It's real simple, but we just have to be brave enough to do it. That's all it is. It's just being brave enough to have these conversations.